I just see a lot of climbers repeat the same mistakes or fall down the same rabbit holes with this stuff because it's such a slippery slope, like you said earlier. So I think talking about your recovery process could be really helpful. And
yeah, I've been working with this amazing nutritionist, and she approaches everything from a very scientific standpoint. I choose to not believe things selectively when I don't want to believe them. But when she tells me, look at this graph, this is the data, these are the percentages of increased athleticism, and I just didn't believe anything until she showed me the numbers. But one of the things that I avoided for a long time, which I think a lot of people do, is fat. Because I don't know, it feels like a lot of people have a fear of fat and don't really understand it, which I definitely related to. But I would really avoid fat, and then I started having very, very bad skin issues where, for example, at collegiate nationals, the first day on, I taken several rest days leading into the competition. And the first day on, in warm-up, every single one of my tips split like vertically just from pressure.
Whoa.
And I spent the entire competition bleeding on taping every tip on every single round because my skin would just flake and bleed. And I didn't realize that I thought it was just a genetic thing maybe, but then when I started incorporating more fat into my diet, I've had 0 skin issues since.
Wow.
And that blew my mind. Yeah. Also, focus in the gym or in school, for example, or in work, or just day to day. Your brain is entirely made of fat pretty much, and you need fat to have healthy brain activity. And that was another thing that kind of blew my mind. After a workout, I was always pretty good about getting protein, but not realizing that if you eat only protein after a workout, your body needs carbs to even use that protein, and it'll break the protein down and use it as carbohydrates if you aren't also incorporating carbs in a 3-to-1 carb to protein ratio after workout. And it felt weird to me that I was doing I felt like I was doing all the right things, just eating a ton of protein, but that my body wasn't even able to absorb the protein in the right way. Also, sleep, for example. Sleep is one of the most important things you can do for recovery, and my sleep was really affected by not eating enough carbs. Because especially when you're eating carbs right before bed, that's one of the things that puts you into a healthy circadian rhythm. Also, I don't know, I always knew that losing a lot of weight quickly was the quick and easy way to perform well, but I didn't realize how unsustainable it was. Because I was performing well for a month or a couple months, and then it just was on progressive decline for basically the entire season. So I imagine that if I gained weight back, then I would never ever be good again.
Tell me about your foot injury in July. It's kind of one of the more unique climbing injuries.
I had never heard of it. Basically what happened is, while I was on the World Cup circuit doing one of the US team training practices, I was standing on a foothold, just starting a climb. I pulled off the ground, stood on a foothold, and my foot just gave out. I was statically weighting it, and it didn't feel like, it didn't feel like I did enough to warrant an actual injury. So I didn't really take myself seriously, but I came back home. It bothered me for a long time, and then I went to the doctor, got an x-ray, and it turned out that I had not only broken a bone, but the blood flow had been cut off to the bone. So it basically was continuing to break more and more, and the bone marrow had calcified. So basically it was unable to heal itself, which was why it had to be removed. And I continued climbing on it for a while and competing on it, because since it was going to be removed anyway, it basically didn't matter if it broke more. But what I learned from that...
That's so hardcore.
Yeah, it was hardcore. It was very unpleasant. But what I learned from the process and from talking to doctors was that one of the main reasons why the bone broke in the first place was compromised bone density, which was a result of, like you mentioned, the eating disorder that I'd had for a while and not getting enough nutrients. And that's something that can happen because of eating disorders, which is a lot more serious than I had realized. I think it was a really big eye-opening moment for me.
Well, I mean, that's what makes eating disorders, and I don't even know if eating disorders is the right word, because I feel like what you're talking about is like this deeper obsession with climbing, this mindset that I have to sacrifice more and give more and work harder to reach the results that I want. I know you've talked about how you felt as though your progress in climbing should be linearly connected to the work and the suffering that you were putting into it. Like the more, you know, you're doing these daily 7-hour in the gym training practices and things. And like when your foot broke in July, leading up to that, you talked about how that had been the result of, you know, low bone density from probably not being nourished enough for quite a long time. Is that something that you had been aware of at any level before that? Or was it kind of, was that the thing that kind of tuned you into what was going on? Did you have awareness of it leading up to that?
In the very beginning, no. I think it's easy. It's a very slippery slope. And all sports glamorize the idea of working yourself to the bone every single day. If you're not bleeding and sore every single session, then you're not putting in enough work. And I think, I don't know, it's very entrenched in sport culture. I mean, if you watch like the Creed movies, for example, every single, it's like the training montage is the hype moment, and then you defeat the bad guy at the end. It's like, I don't know, we're surrounded by these examples of people who have sacrificed everything to get to the top. And yeah, that works for some people for a while. Yeah, it works for some people for extended periods of time, but a lot of what they don't see, I think, I don't know, it's very easy to look at someone standing on top and want to be them, but not realize what the sacrifices actually mean. And then it's also easy to ignore the dozens of other examples of people who have very happy and healthy and fulfilling lives who are also standing on the top, you know? I think we glamorize the suffering a lot, and we don't look at the picture more holistically. But in response to your question before, yeah, I think in the beginning I didn't really know that there was an issue. I knew that what I was doing wasn't necessarily healthy in all aspects, but in terms of like calorie restricting and training, it felt like the right thing to do. And I mean, also partially because I'd taken so much time off for college, I felt like I had ground to catch up. And I felt like I had to be putting in twice as much work as everyone else to even have a chance, which is kind of why I worked myself so hard in the beginning. And even throughout it, I could tell that I wasn't seeing the gains that I wanted, but it felt like a personal failure as opposed to maybe work out half as much. And honestly, you'll see greater gains because your muscles need a chance to recover, because when you're breaking them down, if you don't allow them to recover, then the work you're putting in is actually pretty pointless. Before the bone break, I knew there were issues and I knew that it wasn't sustainable. And honestly, I had thought about quitting before also, which I haven't really told anyone, but I didn't love what I was doing anymore because the sacrifices I had to make kind of felt like they weren't worth it.
I don't know. I think if you've never been through it, you kind of look at it and you're like, what's the big deal? Just like eat some damn food, you know? But it's so much more like nasty and twisted and weird and distorted than that. It's
Yeah, and it also comes down to the things that you tell yourself to justify it throughout the process and while you're doing it. Because it's not just, oh, I'm going to eat less. It's like, I'm going to eat less so I can do these great things. I'm going to eat less so I feel this way about myself, so I look this way. And it is hard to break those chains of thought that you become so used to thinking. It really does become a part of you, and it feels like an identity crisis having to break away from that when you've told yourself that it is what defines you and that you need it almost. It feels like a part of you so much that you need it and you start to identify with the suffering.